The wind carried the scent of juniper and blood. At the edge of the Sierra Blanca, where the pines thinned into bone-colored rock, a riderless horse emerged at dawn. Its flanks were lathered with sweat, its eyes wide with the kind of terror that outlives the thing that caused it. The animal staggered into the mescalero camp, reins dragging, hooves cracked from the descent. It was a black gelding with a white blaze down its face, the horse of Chato, a war scout and father to a girl no one trusted. The girl's name was Naylin. She was 16, with a face too still for her age and eyes that watched everything but gave nothing back. She had no mother, no siblings, no one to speak for her. Chato had raised her alone, teaching her to track, to shoot, to gut a deer with a flint blade. She was small and quick, and she never cried, not even when the other girls whispered that she had no soul. When the horse came back without its rider, the elders gathered in the council lodge. They burned cedar and spoke of omens. Chato had gone out 3 days earlier to scout a trail near the Rio Chilarosa, where settlers had begun to build fences and cut down trees. He had not returned. Now his horse had come home alone, its saddle torn, its flanks marked with dried blood. The medicine man, old Koso, said it was a sign. He said the horse had been touched by evil and that Chato had been taken by witches. He said the girl must be watched. Naylin stood outside the lodge, listening. She did not speak. She did not weep. She stared at her father's horse, at the blood on its flanks, and she waited. That night the wind changed. The stars disappeared behind clouds, and in the darkness something began to move. The next morning they found feathers tied to the fence posts. Red hawk feathers, stained with something that looked like rust but smelled like meat. The old women clucked their tongues and crossed themselves when they saw it. The younger boys kicked dust and muttered words they'd heard their mothers whisper when they thought no one listened. No one claimed the feathers. No one dared touch them. Naylin woke before the others. She had not slept. She had spent the night kneeling beside the fire pit in her father's lodge, the flames long dead, staring into the ashes. She had taken his knife from the saddlebag, wiped the blood from the blade, and held it close to her chest. The edge was still sharp, too sharp for something that had not seen use in 3 days. She did not understand why. She only knew it had not been her father's blood. The elders summoned her to the river that day. They made her walk barefoot, wearing only a deerskin shift. The old women walked behind her, singing a song she did not know. At the bank, the warriors waited. Koso stood with his face painted in ash and blackroot. He held a gourd of river water and a bundle of cedar in his hands. He told her to kneel. She did. He poured the water over her head, muttering prayers. The cedar he burned at her feet. Smoke curled around her ankles. Then he stepped back and asked her what she had seen. She said nothing. He asked her again. She told them she had seen the black horse return alone. That was not what they wanted. One of the warriors, a young man named Teka, said he had seen her alone near the burial grounds 2 nights ago, long after the fires were out. Another woman claimed she heard strange chants from her lodge. A third said she had watched Naylin climb the cliffside barefoot and stand with her arms outstretched, as if calling down thunder. Naylin said nothing. She stared past them to the cottonwoods. Teka stepped forward, his hand resting on the knife at his waist. "Are you a witch, girl?" She turned to him, and her voice came quiet as wind through grass. "My father would not ask that. He is gone." "No, he is not." The warrior laughed, but it was a dry sound. Koso took a long breath, then pointed to the horizon. "We send her to the ridge. If she returns, we will speak again." The ridge was a place of spirits, a sandstone crest 5 miles north, where bones turned to dust and dreams turned to warnings. They sent only the dying or the mad there. Naylin was neither, but she did not object. They gave her a flask of water and nothing else. No food, no bow, no horse. She walked alone, dust rising with each step. By the time the sun dipped behind the cliffs, she was gone from sight. The camp settled back into its silence. Fires burned low, eyes turned inward. But in the darkness, someone heard hooves again, not one horse, 2. And a sound like breathing made of stone. They did not speak of it until morning. When the sun rose, it did so in blood-red haze. And another child had vanished. The ridge did not greet her with ghosts. It gave her wind and silence. Naylin reached it by dusk, legs burning from the climb, water half gone. From up there the world folded beneath her, canyons like torn earth, rivers coiled like sleeping snakes, the camp a smear of smoke far off. She did not cry. Instead, she lay flat on the sandstone, letting the heat from the rock soak into her bones. When night came, she didn't sleep. She listened. Coyotes yipped somewhere below, and owls circled above without sound. At some point, a noise like weeping rose from the east, too low for an animal, too broken for a human voice. She sat up, waited, heard nothing more. Still, she tied a thin piece of leather around her wrist, the one her father had braided from sinew and hair and told her never to take off. By morning, her mouth was dry and her legs stiff. She chewed on mesquite bark and drank the last of her water. She carved a message into the soft rock beside her with the tip of her father's blade. They fear what cannot be buried. Before the sun fully rose, she found the tracks. Hoofprints, two sets, fresh. One was the mark of her father's gelding. She knew the way its right hind dragged slightly on loose soil. The other was something else. Smaller, unshod, lighter but with depth, like something walking with more weight than it ought to have. She followed them, keeping her body low, her breath shallow. The trail led her down the eastern slope, into a gully where the trees grew crooked and the sagebrush choked the path. There, at the edge of a dry wash, she found bones. Not animal. The ribs had been tied together with sinew. A human spine had been bent backward, warped into a curve like a trap. Feathers had been sewn into the skull sockets, and two small hands had been arranged on either side of a flattened turtle shell. It was not a patchy work. She felt the cold through her soles, the kind that rises up through the earth. She backed away slowly, tracing her steps out of the wash, and began to run, not back toward the ridge, but deeper into the trees. The tracks resumed on the far side of the canyon. There the trees grew silent, like they were listening, and ahead she saw him. Or what had once been him. Her father stood barefoot, facing a tree. His hair had grown long and was tangled with twigs. He wore no shirt. His back was marked with cuts, deep ones, as if something had been trying to right through his skin. The horse stood nearby, watching her. "Father," she said, barely louder than breath. He turned, his face was his, but his eyes were not. "You should not be here," he said, voice distant, like it was trying to remember how to use words. "You didn't die." "I did, but not all of me stayed." She stepped closer. The knife was in her hand, but not raised. "What took you?" He did not answer. Instead, he looked down at his hands, as if just realizing they were there. "I followed a trail, smoke over the Rio. They had women, children. I thought I could help, but it wasn't a camp, it was something else, a circle. They sang backwards. They made me drink from a black cup." "What are they?" "Not people." She knew then he was not coming back. He looked at her again, and something flickered behind his ruined eyes. "You have to go now, they're not done. They want the bloodline, the way your mother passed, the way I broke the seal to keep her safe." The ground vibrated beneath her feet. From the trees came the sound of teeth clicking against bone, not footsteps, not breathing. She did not run. Instead, she looked at the gelding, who stood between her and the shadows. And she understood why it had come home, why it had brought no saddle. It had come for her. Naylin turned to the shape that was once her father, bowed her head, and whispered the old words of parting. Then she mounted the gelding bareback, whispered once more in its ear, and rode toward the sound. Back to the camp. Back to the people who would accuse her. Back to the fire she now meant to start. The horse moved like it remembered war. Through scrub, across dry riverbeds, beneath the dying howl of vultures that circled and vanished like torn cloth in the wind. Naylin clung low to its back, her knees tight against the ribs, the knife she kept pressed flat to her thigh. She did not speak to the horse, but it knew where to go, or maybe it fled something neither of them could name. By dusk she saw smoke again, the camp, fires in the distance, too many and wrong-colored, yellow-white like they burned without wood. She slowed the gelding, slid down, and left it in a copse of trees near the dry gulch. It did not follow. She moved through the sagebrush like mist. Her face was streaked with red dirt, her braid unraveled, her shadow long and lean. As she neared the outer ring of lodges, she saw no one. Not a child, not a dog, not even the old women who usually tended fires at dusk. The council lodge was lit. She heard chanting inside. But it was not Koso's voice. It was Tekka. He stood in the center of the fire pit, bare-chested, arms painted in ochre. Around him, 6 others. Faces she recognized, bodies turned strange. They moved in a slow circle, heads tilted back, mouths open. There was something clutched in Tekka's hand, long, black, and wet, with a shine that glinted even without firelight. A braid, her father's braid. Nayland crouched behind a pile of cured hides and watched. Koso was nowhere to be seen, nor the other elders, nor the women, just these 7, chanting words in a tongue older than the hills. Then one of them stopped, sniffed the air like a wolf. She froze. The man turned, eyes yellowed like he'd been struck blind with sulfur. His lips pulled back, and what was left of his teeth looked filed. "I smell her," he said. The circle broke. They poured from the lodge, some on hands and knees, some upright but twisted. They scattered through the camp, calling her name in tones that bent and cracked like firewood. She ran. Not to the trees, not yet. She ran toward the burial mounds. Toward the place where her mother lay. No one had spoken of her mother in years. She had died in silence after a fever came in the 3rd winter of Nayland's life, or that's what they said. But she remembered fragments, a scream in the night, a circle drawn in ash, her father breaking a gourd against stone, shouting names she never heard again. She reached the mound and dropped to her knees. The stone marker was half buried, moss-covered, but she knew the shape. From her belt she took the knife. From her wrist the braided leather cord. She cut her palm, let the blood fall on the grave, and spoke the one name she had never dared say aloud. Dezo. The earth moved. The soil cracked open, not as a grave disturbed, but like a mouth remembering how to speak. A shape rose, thin as bone wrapped in faded deerskin, hair like smoke, eyes full of river light. Her mother. Nayland did not weep. The pain in her hand told her she was alive. "They've returned," she said. The spirit nodded. "They wore the faces of our people," Nayland said. "They danced in the lodge, they took the old ones, they took father." The spirit's hand reached forward, not touching, but close enough that the air felt colder. "You must finish what I could not," her mother said. "How?" "They feed on fear, on exile. They speak lies into the mouths of men. You must burn what they've claimed." Nayland swallowed. "They will kill me." The spirit's face did not change, but her voice turned to iron. "Then die right." The wind shifted. From the camp came screams. The gelding was waiting at the edge of the gulch, ears pinned, legs trembling. She climbed on, blood running down her arm. The blade in her other hand caught the moonlight. This time she did not ride in secret. She rode down the center of the path, through the wide opening of the camp, as fire lit the sky and shadows twisted into forms they never should have had. The horse screamed as it entered the camp, hooves pounding, eyes wild. Nayland held the reins low, her blade drawn, her face marked in her own blood. She rode straight into the firelight. Council Lodge had split open like fruit. Flames licked the inner posts, black smoke clawing upward. Tekka stood in the center of it all, arms spread, mouth open in a howl that never ended. Around him the others convulsed, those who had once been men, their forms shedding shape like snakes burned alive. One writhed on the ground, his limbs backward, speaking in a child's voice that kept repeating Nayland's name. Another flung himself against a tree until his skull split open and worms poured from the crack. She did not slow. She rode straight into the ring, leapt from the gelding's back, and ran at Tekka. He turned too late. Her father's knife sank beneath his ribs. The howl stopped. The wind did not. A blast of cold struck the camp like a scream from the mountain itself. The flames guttered sideways. The fire turned blue. Tekka fell, but what had been inside him did not. It clawed upward through his chest like smoke made solid, something tall and eyeless, mouthless, its skin like torn hide. It lunged at her, fast and cold and loud without sound. She did not run. Instead, she raised the knife again, now glowing faintly, coated in blood, ash, and her father's last breath. She drove it into the ground. The spirit struck her. She fell. Silence followed. For a moment the camp held its breath. Then the thing that had worn Tekka's body cracked apart like clay left in the sun. One by one, the others collapsed, shriveling, folding inward, dissolving into nothing. Smoke drifted upward. She did not move. Then a sound. Not the wind. Hooves. Her father's horse stepped toward her, nuzzling her face. She opened one eye, then the other. She was not dead. But something in her was. The people emerged slowly from the trees, from crawl spaces, from behind toppled lodges. Children clutched mothers who had no voice left. Koso limped out from beneath the roots of a fallen pine, blood trailing from one ear, the cedar charm still hanging around his neck. They looked at her with new eyes, not pity, not fear, something heavier. She stood, face streaked, limbs shaking, blade still warm. "You sent me away," she said. No one answered. "You feared me because I was her daughter, because I was his, because I would not bow." Koso opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. "I am done speaking." She turned. The horse followed. Past the burnt lodge, past the broken circle, past the place where Tekka's bones had turned to dust. She did not look back. Not even when a child called her name. Not even when the sky, for the first time in weeks, cleared clean. In the years that followed, stories would crawl across the desert like wind on stone. That a girl had ridden into the mouth of fire. That the witches inside the lodge had tried to wear her blood like a second skin, and failed. That the dead horse of the dead scout had returned only for her, and would carry no one else. But she did not live in stories. She lived in the high reaches of the mountain, where snow met stone and silence carried weight. She spoke to no one. She hunted alone. She carved new names into canyon walls. And when riders passed beneath, they rode faster. Not because they feared the girl, but because they feared what feared her.